Chase Jarvis, a wonderful award-winning artist, serial entrepreneur, best-selling author already, and we look forward to this book being a bestseller also.
Thank you.
You've been an influential photographer in the past decade. Amazing, and have had campaigns in all different platforms, Apple, Nike, Red Bull, etc. You're an amazing pioneer in so many fields. You are the founder and CEO of Creative Life, and now your book Never Play It Safe is coming. But
I just got the first copies.
know you through your book, your new book also, and this is what everybody's looking forward to. People want to be safe. They want to be feeling they are protected. People evaluate risk versus benefits and all of that. And we have a bold statement coming up October 8th. Never play it safe. Having the ability to go out and explore and live one's full life. What do you tell us in brief about this great book coming?
Well, first of all, Dr. Nader, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a treat and longtime TM supporter, more than a decade. And I think it would be it's a true statement that my background in meditation has actually helped me get to this point where I could write this book. And I'd say the shortest version is that what I've learned and what my research shows, my peers, my friends, historical research, is that all of the best things in our life are on the other side of our comfort zone. There's risk in everything, and yet we are sort of sold a narrative in our culture that there is a way to play it safe. And I don't actually believe that is true. And of course, I'm not talking about seatbelts and sunscreen, and I'm not talking about emotional or physical safety. All those things are real. The kind of safety I'm talking about that we falsely seek is something that we can stay on this side of our comfort zone and still get the best things that life has to offer. So in that phrase, never play it safe, I'm refuting that fact and believe that what we need is a blueprint to get beyond our fears and beyond our comfort zone. And so I've worked for the last 2.5 years on this project, and my belief is that we have a series of tools that natively reside within us that we have access to help us get to all the best stuff in life.
So we can say one can be safe, but not play it safe. Do you think that that makes sense?
Absolutely. I wish I had you in my research team when I was writing the book. It's a great way of thinking of it. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge the, you know, first of all, that there are a handful of tools that reside naturally within us. And one of the things that I guess the first thing that comes to mind, and you can see my lifelong fascination with meditation and specifically TM over the last more than a dozen years, is of these 7 tools that I believe which reside naturally within us that will help us get to the best stuff in life. Our first and very most important is our attention. And the ability to direct our attention is literally how we experience the world. And it's my belief that we can train this. And, it's no surprise to anyone listening to this that when we meditate, or other spiritual practices as well, meditation, awareness practice, prayer, that we go inward and that strengthens this muscle. We are less subject to the things that come before us hijacking our attention, and we can choose. And to me, that is absolutely fundamental to how we experience the world. And again, that's why in my book here, it's the first point of leverage where we get to take control of our life is learning to strengthen the muscle of directing our attention.
This is wonderful. We have a saying in our meditation groups and transcendental meditation that comes from a rishi, actually, that whatever you put your attention on grows stronger in your life. And in my book also, Consciousness is All There Is, it's based really a lot on where we put our attention, what we direct our attention on. And
Yes,
actually, every experience that we have in life is a bit of consciousness, a moment of awareness that impacts us. And so, how do you guide the people in terms of attention? There is outward attention, inward attention, and
yes,
playing it safe. How to play outward and where you direct your attention? Is there a
sure.
system? Is there a technique?
Yes. Well, I try and not be overly prescriptive, but I do find that having a practice of learning to direct your attention, again, you know this because it's one of the reasons we've connected, and over several conversations, I've had you as a guest on my show, and we have some mutual friends, of course. But is for me that practice is transcendental meditation. In the book, I highlight a handful of other mechanisms that I don't want to be too prescriptive. Of course, as someone who's tried most of the things in the book and found that TM was the best for me, I advocate for that. And yet, any form of meditation where you're directing your attention, in this case, um, what we do in transcendental meditation is it's not if our mind wanders. I mean, how long have you been practicing, Dr. Tony? A pretty long time. And what you've shared with me and what I know to be true is that the mind wanders. But it's not our job to criticize or judge. The goal is to build the muscle of returning our attention, in our case, in TM, back to the mantra. But my belief is that this could be any number of practices. Other meditation traditions bring the attention back to the breath or back to the present moment. That is what awareness practice is, right? It's the being aware of the present moment. And so while I personally advocate for TM and a long time, practicer of that, a practitioner, my claim in the book is that it doesn't actually matter for us understanding how we can choose our experience of the world, just that we have some practice where we routinely, and by routinely, I mean daily, develop a habit of controlling our attention. And in a way, it's sort of allowing us to manage this 2 million year old organ that sits between our ears. We want this thing, you know, working for us, not happening to us. And by directing our attention and choosing where we focus on the world, that is, my belief is that's how we do it. And in the book, I share a simultaneously awakening and terrifying story of Viktor Frankl. He was a psychologist, and in 1942 found himself in a concentration camp. This is where the book Man's Search for Meaning came to be. And you can imagine the most horrific experiences on the planet happening in his presence there in a concentration camp. And yet he was able to choose his experience, and the people that he was close to, he was able to help them learn to direct their attention in the most awful circumstances imaginable. And yet that powerful tool helped get him and a cadre of people that he was with through that awful experience, because they were actively choosing where to direct their attention instead of the atrocities that were surrounding them, on the value and meaning that they could find from that. And so I like to invoke that example as an insanely powerful tool that we can wield in our day to day. And if Viktor Frankl can do it in a concentration camp, what if we can do that in our day to day? How much, leverage would we have over our lived experience?
Beautiful. See, in our daily life, the attention can flow in all directions, of course, based on circumstances on the outside. And you're saying that we can be based on the inner value and not be a subject to just as football of situations and circumstances, but be able to actually master our situation by directing our attention. Is that?
That is absolutely accurate and very eloquently said. I will add to it that it's sort of our ability or our belief that we can control the external circumstances in our life that make us that makes it difficult for us. And the Stoic philosopher would say, you cannot control what happens. You can just control your reaction to what happens. And so whatever school of philosophy you practice or whatever your backgrounds or traditions, I think it's clear that when we are able to master our inner life, that our external world starts happening for us rather than to us. And that's not to say that bad things don't happen to good people. And yet, if we can control how we experience that world, how we respond, it just puts us in a position of great strength and allows us to experience the best parts of life rather than live in the worst of them.
Beautiful. See, when one thinks of attention, guiding attention, kind of being in control, one feels like it's a discipline, it's something that is requiring to be serious, and all of that, which is probably part of it in some way. But what is very interesting, if I understand well from reading a little bit already the previews about your book, is that your second asset or point is play, which playing is kind of different from the disciplined seriousness. Do you want to move to that
Yes.
point also?
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, the way the book is structured, it's again that there are a series of tools that naturally reside within us that give us access to the other side, the best parts of life. And it is absolutely true, attention being the one we've just spoken about. But this notion of play is also, this is um our natural state as a human being. Just watch a child, right? They experience the world. The concept of work is something that is drilled into us culturally. And that's not to say that there is not value in putting effort towards outcomes that we seek in the world. And yet we still can choose the attitude that we bring toward those experiences and play. Just think of, if anyone who's listening and watching right now, think of the moments in your life where you felt the most alive, most connected, most joyful. You were carefree. You were with people that you loved. You felt connected. And it's in those moments that life feels frictionless, that there's an interconnectedness to it all. And I posit that this is available to us at all times with a simple choice and an awareness that this is available to us whenever we want. There are, some examples in the book, and it's a very awareness-based lens on this, which is the next time you have to do the dishes, or the next time you have to fold laundry, two arguably benign and maybe somewhat annoying chores if you take it out of context. But if you are to, direct your attention to the beautiful colors of the fabric, the smells that come off the laundry when you open the door to the dryer, you can absolutely have a playful, joyful experience doing something that's very benign, folding clothes or doing the dishes. The philosopher Alan Watts does a nice job of um, of basically reminding us how playful it could be to do the dishes. Let the water run over your hands, the little squeak that you hear when you rub the sponge over the shiny smooth plate. This is always available to us, and yet the world will have you believe that somehow this is a less valuable experience than a mentality that we have to suffer while in our day-to-day work, or that these tasks that are, if it's something that's not obviously playful, like a birthday party, then it must be work or it must be difficult. And I just fundamentally believe that's not true, and that our orientation is the experience that we had. So we might as well lean into the fact that play is part of our natural state.
Beautiful. It's like work maybe is a mechanical imposition of steps in time and in sequence that one has to kind of work with under certain circumstances, and you cannot do this, but you can do that. And it seems you're saying that, as sounds great, is that play is a freedom also to wander a little bit and also to choose what your attention is. So there is this freedom maybe in play that allows a field of all possibilities. The beautiful examples you take in terms of you're doing something which is washing the dishes, so you want to finish by washing the dishes, but where is your attention on? It can actually, in that time, of course, not break the dishes while you're washing them, but certainly you can enjoy certain water flow, how it flows, how things happen. And so that means even washing the dishes becomes a work play that is structured, because attention is also protecting the plates and others from breaking and doing
It,
splashing all over. But at the same time, your attention can float on different things. And that's the sense of freedom, I guess, that we appreciate in play, because in play it's like just try and play this and play that and be creative and all of that.
well, yeah, that's, again, the headline to my book, the title is Never Play It Safe, but the subheading is A Practical Guide to Freedom, Creativity, and a Life You Love. And I think it's really wise of you to invoke the freedom here. I think that's what so many of us seek when it's unclear what it is that we're seeking. And this inner calm that we get from, say, a practice of meditation or learning to direct our attention, what we feel in that moment is a tremendous sense of connectedness and freedom. We're free from the things that typically, when we're not able to be present in the present moment, that we feel bound to in a negative capacity, the work that we have to do, the list of things that we have to do, we owe something to this person or that. And what we've found, or my experience in meditation, and a willingness to see life as something joyful and free, is just this lightness, a levity of I think you would call it pure consciousness. Just, the ability to be present in the moment is the ultimate experience for a human being.
Beautiful. Because the tendency, the nature of the mind is to go towards something more and more pleasing. We always want to have something that is pleasing. And this is the nature of the mind when it's allowed to be free and to float. You mentioned transcendental meditation and going back to the mantra, but that is the vehicle, of course, to allow the mind to go where it wants. And in this case, to go to objects or experiences or memories that are more and more pleasing. And when you direct it inwards, the inner value, the most profound value, is most pleasing, because it's really going back to the self.
Yes.
So, in that sense, it's a free flow, as if meditation, even though we are guiding the attention in some way to just keep it going in the direction of more pleasing, we're allowing it to play, we're allowing it to be free, we're allowing it to float to where it really wants to go. And so, not putting boundaries and being, again, to use your terms, trying to be safe, trying to be attached to something we have absolutely thought this is the only way to do things, and this is how to be disciplined, and this is how to protect ourselves, but allow that freedom of play. That's really beautiful, very
Thank
beautiful.
you. Thank you. I would love to share a story of a friend of mine. He is a legendary author, very high performing person. He's got one of the top podcasts in the world. And I'll leave his name out of it because, well, I have his permission to share it, but I think it may distract from the story, but he's a household name. And we were together, about, well, let's call it about 6 or 8 years ago. And he asked me, he said, "You've got this sort of levity around you, some sort of, I don't know, tell me a little bit more about how, like, what, what moment are you in right now in your life? You feel really light and joyful." And to be honest, he was on a book deadline at the time. And he said, I'm struggling right now. And I could use a little bit of whatever you've got. And I shared with him that, this is, the result of a few years of transcendental meditation. And he said, "Well, gosh, my fear if I sort of meditate is that, my edge, the way I get through life, is by having sort of my hackles up and by, working so hard and grinding. And essentially, it's the opposite of directing our attention and the opposite of the freedom that we feel when we play. So he's going on and on about this. And I said, look, you need to invest in your meditation practice. This is my number one recommendation. And after some humming and hawing, and I got him connected with someone. And in this case particular, this is not an advertisement for TM, but I did get him to sign up for Transcendental Meditation. And about 3 months after he went through the program, we were together again. And he said, I have to confess, the thing that I thought was my strength, this edge that I had, my vigilance, my hackles up, my sort of work mentality. I had always attributed that as the vehicle for my success. And on reflection now, on the backside of now practicing, having a rigorous meditation practice for just a few months, I see that not only did that not give me freedom, but it actually was an anchor. It was the thing that was keeping me from all of the best stuff in life. So it's this combination, in the book, I talk about the combination between directing our attention, being, willing and able to have a practice to do that. And that when we do, as you said, it's just getting it going in a normal direction. And our, our natural state is one of play and joy and freedom. And my particular friend has been on that path ever since, with this simple sort of guidance towards, hey, what if you learn to direct your attention? What if you had a playful disposition and let your mind do the thing that it wants to do? And, he's just become, I would say, even more connected, kinder, smarter, and ironically had better professional success in the process.
Beautiful. You mentioned your friend was having a deadline for writing a book. That reminded me also, and came to the attention of what you're saying, attention and play and all of that. Is that when you actually write, sometimes if you try to be very focused and want it to come perfect and attached to perfection right away
Right.
and not playing with it, it's hard to write. And when I was starting to write and all of that, I got a wonderful advice from reading even on the internet of like what writer's block is when people are you know, not able to produce something. And
Mm-hmm.
that is, don't try to write perfect. Just play, just sit and say what's on your mind, wherever your attention flows. Don't make it like the lines perfect, the whole thing, the grammar, the ideas, and all of that. Just write and write and write. Play in a sense, play what's
Yes.
writing, enjoy it, and then you can actually correct it later. And that's a very important aspect, and also productivity and outcome, because one
Yes.
feels if you're playing as if you're wasting your time. So there is a contrast here between work and being strict and all of that, and at the same time playing. And that brings us to actually the third maybe component, time, which you bring out.
Mm,
I'm getting
yes.
maybe off the discussion, but
No, I love it.
kind of flows naturally, it seems to me.
Well, that's, again, my point in this book is that our awareness of these tools, whether it's our natural state of play or naturally how our attention goes. Another one, as you highlight, is our relationship with time. So many people that I know, myself included, and I want to be very clear, this book is not about how I've lived this perfect life. It's actually quite the opposite, is how I've betrayed myself over and over and over. And yet I can still find my way back, in the same way that we redirect our attention to the mantra. I can find my way back to myself over and over again. And that is our natural state. But one of the things that I chased my tail for the first 20 years of my professional career as an artist and an entrepreneur, because I always thought that there was never enough time. And what that relationship with time made me scurry around and do all sorts of unnatural behaviors. And my belief was that I was chasing this illusion of safety and chasing the fact that, oh, if I could just, you know, meet the next deadline or get 5 extra pages written on my book or hit the next milestone for my company, that there would somehow be some sort of freedom on the other side of that. And yet we all know that it's easy to say these things and to step out of the mind space of this sort of toxicity, and yet we find ourselves consistently being pulled back like the tractor beam in Star Wars to this archaic experience that the world is happening to us. There's some treadmill in the background where time is just marching along. And yet we have all had the experience of time being very fluid. I'll share this morning, my meditation, I felt as if it was simultaneously 30 seconds long, and that I went on a journey of a lifetime. It was just a very profound meditation this morning. That doesn't always happen. Maybe it's because I was looking forward to our conversation. But the people who are able to direct their attention and can take this playful experience with life, time tends to work in their favor at all times. In the moments where we want time to slow down and to be able to be present, we're there with it. And to me, that's a beautiful thing. Imagine if you didn't have to scurry around, if you could change the narrative inside that there always is enough time, there's always the right amount of time in our day-to-day experience. What would life be like?
Absolutely beautiful. And again, time is so relative. If you're well rested and clear and feeling good, you are able to concentrate, you're able to focus, while making it a playful, enjoyable ability to have good attention. But at the same time, it's on the platform of a very rested, clear state. And that's why you mentioned meditation many times. Again, this is not about meditation. It's about your book today, which we are enjoying to delve into the beautiful things you have explored and that you are presenting in this great book. But people say like, oh, I don't have time to meditate. I have so busy. It's like somebody who has money and says, I want to keep my money. I don't want to get rid of it and put it in the bank or invest it. But then your money doesn't grow if you don't invest it somehow. And so time is also something you invest in by going deep within and reaching that state of settled feeling that allows you then to use time more effectively.
Absolutely.
And it reminded me of something which, when I was young, if you don't mind, we
Please, this is a discussion. I don't want to be interviewed. I want to learn from you while we're spending time together, as I always do.
That's wonderful. You know the Jean de La Fontaine, who is a French poet. He wrote many fables that are very interesting. One of them is The Hare and the Tortoise. And the story is in The Hare and the Tortoise is that they are having a competition who will reach the point earlier than the other. And so the tortoise starts and works hard, and the hare is running around, playing, experiencing things, and going around. And at the end, he realizes that he's late, and the tortoise is going to win. And then he starts running, and gets to the point at the end, but just barely, and he loses a little bit the competition. So he lost the fight. And we always have been taught, and like the last line in this poem where it says, there is no point in running, you have to start on time. And that means, the whole thing about the wisdom of the tortoise starting on time and working hard and arriving on time. And then we had a teacher who is amazing, who said the character of this poet, Jean de La Fontaine, was completely like the hare, not like the tortoise. He was flying around, experiencing all kinds of things in life, jumping around, trying every kind of possible thing, experiencing life and learning. And he said, it cannot be that his poem is to say that you have to just be strict and work hard and all that. Because look at the end product. This hair, went around, experienced the flowers, smelled things, discovered things, had a time of his life and enjoyed amazing things and learned probably amazing things, while the tortoise were laboring and laboring and laboring, so that at the end it can say, well, I crossed the line a second before you. Now, that is really, a reminder of how we use our time. Are we enjoying life? Is the past also fulfilling? Is every moment of life meaningful? Or is it just hard work? And, I leave this to you and to everyone's wisdom to decide, but maybe the tortoise was the right thing to do. But I guess you're telling us, you know, don't
It's
try to play it safe and be too hard and
exactly like,
lose
again,
life.
the foundation that I wrote, and I'll tell like a short story here in a second, but the foundation is that all of the things like the tortoise and the hare, for example, there's wisdom in both. And if we do learn to direct our attention and we can have a joyful, play oriented disposition towards life and towards our experience, even when things are difficult, that whether you're the hare or the tortoise, your experience of time is exactly as it should be. Like, for example, today I find so much bliss in that state that I get, that meditative state that I'm in when I'm, especially my morning meditations. And it simultaneously was so deep and beautiful today. And yet it felt like it only lasted 30 seconds. And so there's a part of me that I try not to acknowledge that is yearning for this to continue. And yet, wait a minute, everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. And if I'm living in the past, that's when I start to have these feelings of, oh, I wish it was better. Or if I'm sitting here in my meditation, I can't wait for my evening meditation. That's delaying the current experience that I'm having right now, or it's degrading it rather because I'm focusing my attention on something that might never come. So, to me, our awareness of time, and I think you do a really lovely job of articulating that with that story there, is so true. And my goal is to get us to start to pay attention to these things, and the fact that our relationship with time is when we're in this playful, attentive state, that again, time is happening for us rather than to us. That's the objective. And the story that I wanted to share, it's a brief detour from our conversation, but I hope it adds to it. The way that I landed on the title of this book was not on accident. I had been working on this book for about two years, 18 months of actively writing every day. And just a couple of months before the deadline, and as someone who's written, books as you have, these deadlines, they can have this mysterious effect on us, and they start to constrict. I feel sometimes constricted. I've got to perform a certain way or whatnot. And yet I realized 2 months before my deadline that the book I'd been working for the last 2 years on wasn't the right book. And so I threw everything in the trash and I started over. And hat tip to my agent, Steve. He said, Chase, talk to me about this. Like, what's going on? And I just said, I'm aware that this is not the book that I was supposed to write. And I was playing it safe. I was writing a very tidy book that other people would probably think was appropriate, and yet that's not what needs to come out of me right now. And he made a comment about, I'll trust you. Time, time tends to work for us rather than, especially when we're listening to our intuition. And this book poured out of me like, filling a glass of water with a running spigot. It was not effortless, but it all came together in a record amount of time. And that's specifically because I had removed all of the pressure on myself to fit into the wishes and the direction of others. And it was just a quiet moment to myself when I decided how this book was going to come together. And it was unbelievable. It was an experience like I've rarely ever had. And so simultaneously, I don't know too many people that have written a 250 page book about their life experience and the life experiences of, a bunch of other really interesting people that have done so in 8 weeks. And yet that's what we're that's what's possible. We're capable of these things. And so simultaneously, I learned a lot about time, that it was on my side if I let it, and that it was this listening, this quiet listening, that was in service of my one precious life, and in doing the combination of those things, that I was able to also. It was considered very risky from my agent and publisher's perspective, and that's where I had a little yellow sticky in the corner of my monitor that said "Don't play it safe," which just meant to pour it all out on the page.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Attachment to the results also is can
Yeah.
uh, prevent us from actually going through the past in the most creative, most intelligent way.
Can I ask a question, Dr.
Yes,
Nader?
yes.
There's I mean, you are a neuroscientist, and how does our experience of time from a scientific perspective, how, because my experience, my lived experience is that time is so elastic. Maybe you've been in a car accident before, or I was caught in an avalanche and I had that experience. And we've all been, say, out in nature where, a 2 day camping trip or a 3 day camping trip feels like 2 or 3 weeks. From a scientific perspective, I understand from a spiritual connectedness to my own lived experience, what it feels like. But scientifically, can you talk to me about what's going on with our neurology?
Well, it's a big question, even in terms of physics of time and space-time. Now, it's a very big discussions among quantum physicists and all of that. And time, one thing we know, of course, is that as we grow older, time seems to pass faster.
Hmm.
And the correlations is between like speed of time and events that happen within time, and the ability to detect moments of experience when we are, for example, going through an accident.
Hmm.
There is hyper alertness. This is where attention comes.
Yes.
And then attention comes, and then you are able to experience things in a very, very sequential way. So many things happen in those few seconds because you are completely focused and your brain start firing much faster. And so the images are cut in a very sequential way, as if you have a slow motion camera, because you're a
Yeah.
photographer.
Yeah,
You
I
know
know
that
this. Yes, I know this.
when the camera takes many, many pictures, one in a sequence, you can then slow them down and it appears like flowing slowly in time. And so the number of pictures that you get gives you that impression of slowness of time.
Yes.
And of course, there is the absolute reality of time or not time, as time that goes on the clock, which is a different story,
Yes.
that changes with speed and all of that. And
Well,
then
I'm
moments when you are transcending, when you're going beyond, time of specific object, but you are living in a moment of aha, of epiphany, of feeling of fullness and settledness, then these individual pictures or realities, they melt into each other, and this is how you feel the time is no more there. The time really stops. And so,
this. Yes.
yeah.
That experience that you just articulated there is, I'll make a sports analogy for any sports people are listening. Michael Jordan used to talk about the game happening in slow motion for him, basketball. He talked about it being so easy. He could see things, because he was so present. And to me, this is the gift. We are originally connected around our the consciousness conversation and the awareness that transcendental meditation brings. But that is the experience that I began to have when I built a meditation practice, is where I would normally feel so frenetic and, I would just always feel behind. Everything suddenly felt absolutely methodical and simple. And my friends in the meditation world or the mindfulness, or where my wife is actually a meditation and mindfulness teacher, so I've got someone to lean on in my immediate family here. But it was just a beautiful way. Even the most joyful moments were slow, and where I really needed to be present. For example, if something stressful was happening, my ability to just be with it and to have the same sort of amount of clarity, and intuitiveness around those moments, it was like a superpower. Now, whether I'm and not trying to compare myself to Michael Jordan, but if you desire to experience time in this way, where beautiful moments are slow and you're engaged with them, and stressful moments you're able to be at your best because the world is unfolding in a very slow and methodical way, like that's available to us all of the time. And that's, again, the core message of my book, is that it's when we are doing these things, practicing our attention, aware that time, if we do direct our attention, that time can expand to fulfill all of the things that we need in this life. If we can trust our intuition, for example, take a playful point of view towards this life, wow, how rich would this experience be?
Beautiful, very beautiful. It's time to take a quote from your book. I managed to have one. And it says, safety is an illusion. It does not exist in nature. So why then do we seek it? Why do we believe it is essential for a good life when in reality the pursuit of safety is what keeps us from feeling the most alive? Looking into your soul for a moment, or look into your soul for a moment. That's beautiful. That's like attachment to something prevents you from seeing all the other things. That's maybe
Yeah,
the hare and the tortoise also. And if you want to comment on this quote, or we can ask the question also at the same time, who won? Who was failing? Did the hare really fail? And did the tortoise really win, or it is personal? And that is your other key tool, which speaks about failure.
sure. Well, let's talk about failure for a second. But before we do, I would love it if you would always read the quotes and just travel around the world with me while I'm on my book tour, reading beautiful sentences like that. It sounds so much better when you say it than when I say it. So I'd love to request that you come on all of my book tour stops with me, please, first of all. Um, Second of all, uh, absolutely. I think that, that's the central premise for the book, is when, from a career perspective or from a relationship choice, we are led to believe, culture teaches us incorrectly, that there is a safe path. And there's a great quote from Helen Keller that I'll just share as well. It's aligned with that. Essentially, Helen Keller said, security is mostly a superstition. It doesn't exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. And how that fits into this material is, we are led to believe that there is a safe choice in a relationship or in a career, as two examples. And yet, those are absolutely the safe path, whatever you find safe as a career or in a relationship, has exactly the same number of pitfalls as do your biggest, wildest dreams. The pitfalls may be different, but the number of them are the same. And I would argue that arguably they're greater for the things that appear safe, because what is it if you're trading in this one precious life? You're trading on the back of what could be versus what you think is, predestined for you. And the reality is, I don't know anyone who feels completely fulfilled having chosen the path, first of all, that other people want for us. And second of all, the one that we are led to believe is somehow free of difficulty or peril or strife, or to the point that you bring up, failure. And to me, I think that's a really interesting thing. So to me, that's the lens we have on that quote. And then specifically to the point of failure, it sounds very trite and it's easy to say. You can read these quotes on the internet, fail fast, fail forward, fail often. And yet real failure hurts. Failure in a relationship, a stumbling block. But this is where I would lean on the scientist in you. And the science on this is very, very clear. When they've measured outcomes of failure, whether this is a venture capital, investment, there's all sorts of different vectors where they can study failure very, very clearly in sports, for example, or in investing. And the groups that look at failure as a stepping stone, as a temporary point of awareness where we can look at what worked and what did not, and when we can reapply our effort in a slightly different but similar direction towards the outcome that we seek, that experience of failure actually propels us in the direction that we want to go. Now, failure is a very abstract term, and yet what's the opposite of that? The opposite is either trying blindly over and over again or stop trying. And both of those, seem absurd to me. I'll just give one more example. How many people who are listening or watching, if you have a child, an able-bodied child, say the 129th time your child, while learning to walk, stumbled and fell down, how many of you said, well, I guess my child is not a walker. We're going to call it good. They're not a walker anymore. No one said that. And yet we do that to ourselves all of the time when we stumble or fail. We just say, I guess I'm not good enough at this, or I guess this isn't my calling in life. And yet we think of it absurd when we would consider that for our child learning to walk. So I asked the question in the book, and I will ask you now, Dr. Nader, why are we so easy to give up, and what role does failure play in our human experience through your lens?
It's the feedback, the kind of feedback we get from a failure, where if there is pain associated with it, then we are afraid of failing again. And what you're saying, and it's beautiful, is that we should look beyond the specific event, maybe learn from it, but look at what other possibilities we can have, what other options are there. And so the ability to keep the freedom of thinking, the freedom of experiencing, and the creativity that is needed to overcome a moment of failure and see even in the challenges opportunities. And so it's a big, huge topic
Yeah.
where clarity of thinking, and that brings us to also having the ability to choose, having the ability to have proper intuition, as you say,
Hmm.
and repeated things like practice and all that. So we have these three key tools that are remaining, and I'd like to see how much time you want to spend
Sure.
intuition, practice, and constraints.
Sure. It's true. There are 7 tools that I talk about in the book, and the ones that we haven't mentioned, um, I'll take them in order. Constraints. We are often easy to lean into the things that keep us down, our constraints. We don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. We don't have enough resources, whatever those things are. And yet, if you look at the experience, this is where creativity, which is our natural state as human beings. And if you have labeled yourself as a person who's not creative, I really want you to rethink that, because you're constantly creating. The day-to-day life that you're experiencing is largely of your choosing. And so if we can think of ourselves as creative, and then we can think of, wait a minute, constraints are actually the thing that are creating our creativity. What if we could think of constraints as, again, a thing that's happening for us rather than to us? And this as an author. The blank page is a very scary thing. If I said, by contrast, please write me a story. It can only be 1 page long. There are two characters, Tony and Chase, and I would like to know a story about the dialogue that they have together and what's possible with human consciousness. Go. It's much easier for us to begin to write the story because it probably begins with Tony and Chase got together on a Zoom call, and we've got a framework. So if you extend that metaphor to our life, what if you could see the so many things that we think of as holding us down, a lack of resources, a lack of resourcefulness, for example, as guiding principles on how we should operate. If you don't have enough money, then maybe you should begin by operating it around something that doesn't require money. If you are don't like where you live, what can you do to transcend that in this moment? Whether, like, we are not able to be together in person right now, and yet here we are. And you can think about this on any number of vectors. Uh, if a constraint is what you're facing right now, how can you, again, I'll cite Stoic philosophy. What if the obstacle is the way? What if you only had, 10 nails and two pieces of wood and a hammer? Could you build a shelter? Well, I bet you could, because if it's very clear, it can't be a very sophisticated design, but you could certainly make something. So I encourage people to think of constraints as a positive rather than a negative. And in fact, that's how the most creative thinkers think. Those are just guidelines. They're pushing us in a direction. Two other remaining tools.
I just
Please do.
insert
Please
a
comment. Yes,
short
please.
comment on constraints, which I'm sure you have brought already and want to emphasize, because I emphasize also in my book, Consciousness is All There Is, that there are two kinds of constraints, if you like, but there are also two kinds of ways of seeing things. One is what we call object referral, which mean the constraints in this case that are in the environment or that you see in your life. And there is the subject referral, the self-referral aspect, which is how you look at things. Is reality made out of only the outer values, or also, and certainly more, how you look at things, how you are, and your ability to manage your universe from within? And as you say, the outer values can be real opportunities and not necessarily at all obstacles. They just teach us how to grow and to get over them if the inner values, the inner reference is solid and strong. And the greatest obstacles are within, are the self-limiting beliefs, the self-limiting constraints that we impose on ourselves. So, you mentioned the Stoics. It's not the situation on the outside that is the only defining aspect of our next steps of our life and our actions and our ability to be happy and all of that. It's also, and most certainly, the inner value, how you see things from within, how you interpret them, how you're able to overcome them. I guess I'm repeating in a sense what you said, but it was.
No, but it's beautiful. And I do articulate, you've been influential to me on that point, that, we see largely, it's easy to see the outer constraints, but it's very easy when you are able to be present to think of how we are creating so many of these constraints in our own mind. And what would it be like if, again, this idea of limitless experience, this limitless consciousness that is available to us if we allow it. And, it's simultaneously empowering and frustrating that we do the dirty work, right? We do the dirty work on ourselves. And if we could instead see ourselves as free, see ourselves as enlightened, connected beings who can direct our attention and can live the experience that we seek on this world, rather than see the roadblocks as things that define us. To me, that's part of the awareness that I'm trying to bring with the book, and specifically a chapter on the constraints. We do the punchline is we do the dirty work on ourselves. And what if we could let go of that? What would be possible?
Beautiful. Intuition and practice are left. We don't want to finish without
Of course. Now,
some
I
words on
think
each.
intuition is the most powerful thing that we knew the least about. And so many of us are quick to run to rational thought. And yet the science is also pretty clear that rational thought is also a little bit slow and a little bit bumbling relative to our intuition. And this is why they call it a gut feeling, is because we have, I don't know, you can probably cite the number, but n trillion number of cells that make up our body. And the science is starting to indicate that those cells have their own sorts of memory. It's different than our rational memory, which happens in the mind. And yet, we've all had the experience of wanting to trust this part of ourselves. We've been conditioned largely to ignore it and to use the organ between our ears as the defining true north. But how many times have you gone against that gut feeling only to realize that you should have listened to it in the past? Now, I'm not saying intuitive thinking should replace rational thought, but it does have a very powerful place in our human experience. And this is one of my favorite things, being present in the body. That's when I'm meditating. To me, this is where bliss, I'm almost the experience that I have in my body is it sort of vanishes a little bit. There's this it's the calm water that we've talked about being able to go deep into. And I want that. This is a natural state that I seek. And yet, again, the book is meant to present these very counterintuitive ideas. What if you trusted your intuition? What if you trained that as a muscle, just like we train our attention? What does it feel like to listen to those gut feelings that you have? And I bet there's some exercises in the book that if you started acting on those, that you might experience life unfolding for you in a mysterious and, I will argue, more beautiful way. I'm curious what you think about intuition, because you're sitting there between the science realm and the spiritual realm, and you've had intuitive experiences your whole life too. What would Dr. Tony say about this?
There are two aspects of intuition. Is that one is in my mind is the finest level of the intellect, which means we have our consciousness on different levels. There is the awareness of the surface. There is a deeper understanding and more profound motivators that are what usually called in the subconscious. And even people call, unconscious, those aspects that influence us, but we don't even have access to them, can't even take our awareness there, but they are there. For me, all of these are layers of consciousness itself, but different layers of that. And
Mm,
so the finest level of intellect is when you have the ability to choose something without understanding necessarily all the logic that is behind the decision or the understanding or the choice on a surface level. Yet your brain, your deep intuition, your deep knowledge allows you to analyze things and come out with a solution as, let's say, a first impression or a quick impression. This is one level. And that is really most effective when the mind is quieter.
right.
I
Yes.
usually take the example of, if you throw a big, huge rock in a stormy ocean, you don't see anything. You don't see the effects of the rock thrown in the ocean. But if the ocean is calm, or if you have a pond that is very settled, even by touching it with your finger or a little pebble, you can see the wave that it creates. So that big rock, when you throw it in the stormy ocean, has created something, but you can't see it because your mind is agitated. So the mind is like the ocean. If the mind is settled, then you can experience the finest level of people's feelings, people's desires, and even go beyond the eyes of what they see and the ears of what they hear, and can feel things at a distance because your consciousness is settled. And so
That is
that's what brings
beautiful.
us to transcending, going beyond the surface, going to the self, settling down. And from that platform, any wave in the surface, you can experience it. That
That
is
is so beautiful.
intuition.
That is so beautiful. And once again, I'm just going to kidnap you and take you on my book tour with me so you can explain it that beautifully to everyone who's willing to listen. Now, I would be um, it would be incomplete if I didn't speak about the last tool that resides naturally within us, which is our desire to practice, our desire to take action in the world. And the practice point that I'd like to make here is that all of this is a work in progress. It's not to say that we will never betray ourselves, and the goal is not perfection. Just like the goal of meditation isn't only to sit perfectly, it is actually the process of the mind wandering and us bringing it back that is part of the experience. That's why they call it meditation practice, right? It's not instantly, it doesn't instantly happen. These are muscles. Our intuition is a muscle. Our ability to calm our mind, to become more aware. These are available to us in different degrees, depending on how long we've practiced and how um, our level of experience, for example. And what I would articulate is this is a very profound feeling inside of our human experience is the act of actually taking action and practicing towards these things that we seek. Unlimited consciousness is available to us, but not immediately. We must put in a little bit of work. And the same thing with our intuition, our ability to direct our attention. Play, although it comes naturally, the world has trained it out of us, and it's our job to reawaken, to look within, excavate the things that the world piles on us to unearth our natural state. So I don't know how any of this would be possible without a practice. And my goal with presenting this as a tool is just to remind us that this could be joyful. This could be something that we appreciate, even if it does feel like we're trying to, a habit, that forming a habit is difficult. What if you just allowed it to be easy, allowed it to be playful, and made it a part of your day to day? Well, wouldn't that be spectacular?
Wonderful. Never Play It Safe by Chase Jarvis. It's joy to be with you.
Thank
Wonderful
you
book.
so much,
Beautiful book.
Dr.
Coming
Tony.
October 8th. Let's wish it a great success and be a bestseller like many
Thank
of
you.
your activities and other books.
Awesome. Well,
Any
thank you
other
so
points you
much.
like to say to everyone?
I would just like to pay a debt of gratitude for your leadership and kindness and intelligence that you put out in the world. All your writings are just very profound, and it's a treat to be in the same circle and to call you a friend. And I really appreciate the time to share with all your listeners and watchers out there. My new book, Never Play It Safe.
Thank you, Chase. Wonderful to be with you. A joy for all of us.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.